Welcome to her Fireside Stories. They thought I was just an old woman in mourning, but 5 seconds after I buried my son, my daughter-in-law was already plotting to lock me away and sell the house we built together. I'm Beatrice Caldwell, a mother, a widow, and until that moment, a fool for trusting the woman who once called me mom. Standing beside my son's coffin, I overheard her whisper cold as stone that now she could finally get rid of me, that she'd waited for this moment. And in that instant, my heartbreak turned into something sharper resolve. This isn't just a story about inheritance and betrayal. It's about a mother and wife stripped of everything, finding the strength to protect what's left her dignity, her home, and the memory of the son who saw the truth before it was too late. So, if you've ever felt powerless or been cast aside by someone you once loved, stay with me because this isn't just a revenge story. It's the story of how I turned grief into power and left the one who betrayed me utterly speechless. I almost collapsed when I overheard my daughter-in-law say she couldn't wait to lock me away. It happened mere minutes after I'd placed my trembling hand on my son's coffin, my heart shattering under the weight of grief. My name is Beatrice Caldwell, and I'm 68 years old, a widow for nearly a decade now. And as of that terrible day, the mother of a buried child, I didn't think anything could hurt me more than losing Leon, my only son, to a rapid, merciless illness. But then I heard Serafina, his wife, murmur those poison-laced words in the hallway. Her voice was oddly jubilant for someone draped in mourning attire. "Thank God," she whispered to a friend. "Now I'll finally get rid of that old burden. Leon's gone, and she can't rely on him anymore." My knees went weak and my breath caught in my throat like a jagged bone. I had always tried to be a graceful woman, even in the face of adversity, and my short silver bob, a hairstyle, chosen to embrace my age and dignity, clung neatly to my head as I leaned on my cane. I'd worn that look since losing my husband Gregory 8 years prior. It helped me feel put together in a world that seemed determined to unravel me. But in that moment, no outward composure could disguise the horror welling up inside. I clasped the handle of my cane so tightly my knuckles turned white. This was supposed to be a day of mourning, yet Serafina was already strategizing her next move, disposing of me. Serafina was once the vibrant young woman my son adored, always sporting a sleek platinum blonde pixie cut that turned heads whenever she entered a room. She had looked so glamorous and modern, an image of youthful ambition, and Leon loved how her hairstyle matched her sharp mind, both always gleaming, always immaculate. I had admired her gusto and passion once. Never did I suspect that under that stylish exterior lay a heart with more ice than compassion. My son's funeral was supposed to be a final farewell to a beautiful life cut short, but it had become something more sinister, a stage for betrayal. A glimpse at an unfolding plan to oust me from the home Leon and I had nurtured together. I wasn't sure where I would go or how I'd fight back. But I knew as I steadied my cane and forced myself to keep walking that Serafina was sorely mistaken if she believed she could destroy me with such ease. In the moments following that shocking revelation, I forced myself to rejoin the hush of the funeral parlor. Candles flickered around Leon's casket, the pungent scent of lilies mixing with the stale odor of sorrow. My chest felt so tight I wondered if my own heart might fail. Then and there, family, friends, and mourners filled the seats, some openly weeping, others sitting in stunned silence. Despite my spinning mind, I maintained my composure. At times like these, your face must be a fortress, I reminded myself. My mother's old advice coming back to me from decades past. Serafina, delicate black veil pinned to her perfectly coiffed pixie, played the role of grieving widow to perfection. She dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief, glancing around to ensure she was being observed. Her real tears had dried long ago. It seemed replaced by a theatrical performance. I recalled the early days of their marriage, her unstoppable energy, her excitement to become part of our family, how she insisted on calling me Mom. Leon, with his thick, wavy hair so different from my own short silver locks, had been smitten from the moment he met her in college. Their wedding was a grand affair. Though I'd offered to keep it simple, Serafina wanted everything big. The hall, the flower arrangements, the photos on social media for the world to see. Leon starry-eyed acquiesced to all of it. As the mourners stood to share their memories of Leon, I found myself drifting. My arthritis flared in the cold interior of the funeral home, each ache a reminder of my mounting worries. Would I have a place to live tomorrow? Would Serafina make good on her threat to shove me into some dismal nursing facility? Or maybe she'd do worse, take me far away from my grandchildren, leaving me with no one and nothing. She had ways of twisting truths, ways of stacking the odds in her favor. I felt the entire room tilt when I remembered how Leon had pulled me aside 2 weeks before his passing. "Mom, I've changed some things," he said, voice trembling, but resolve firm. I hadn't fully understood then what he meant, but he'd sworn it was for my protection. His eyes were determined yet heavy with regret. If only I had pressed him further, demanded more details about the changes he'd made. Perhaps I could have been better prepared for the storm that was about to descend upon me. The hours after the funeral were a blur of condolences and casseroles, pitying looks, and murmured reassurances that never quite reached my ears. I had a fleeting notion that I should say more to Serafina, confront her about what I'd overheard, but my heart was still raw, and my mind raced with possibilities. Instead, I let the day drag on mechanical in my acceptance of kind words. I offered watery smiles and polite nods, even as my nerves buzzed with each breath of air. Serafina took, she seemed determined to make a grand show of leading me from room to room, propping me up at her side for the community of mourners to see. "She's so caring," people commented. "It's a blessing she's looking after Beatrice." Little did they know. When dusk finally settled, we returned to the house I had shared with Leon for 5 years. My old place was sold shortly after my husband's death. Leon had insisted that living together would help ease my loneliness. Serafina, too, had seemed supportive, at least in the beginning. I remember her words then. "Think of it like a big, happy family under one roof." My portion of the home's cost had come from Gregory's life insurance and the proceeds of selling our former family home. I trusted them to handle the paperwork, especially since Serafina was in real estate. It had all been done in their names. Of course, I never once considered they might use that technicality against me. Now I found myself navigating the wide marble foyer, feeling no sense of comfort. The air smelled of lemon polish and deceit. My steps reverberated each click of my cane. A lonely echo I passed by the living room, where plush armchairs and tasteful decor I'd helped pay for seemed to mock me. My teenage grandson Damien noticed my shaken demeanor. He had his father's wavy hair slightly longer on top, which he often brushed aside with an anxious hand. "Are you okay, Grandma?" he asked quietly. Serafina appeared before I could answer. "Your grandmother's just tired," she cooed, casting me a dangerous glance that said, "Remember your place." My granddaughter Paige peered at me uncertainly, her twin braids swaying as she shuffled in the hallway. She was only 10, and I could sense her confusion. I wanted to assure them both that everything was fine, but my mouth felt stitched shut by fear of what I'd discovered. Later that night, while the house lay in unsettled silence, I sat on the edge of the guest bed, my bed for the past 5 years, and stared at the framed photo of Leon. It was taken on his wedding day. He wore a navy suit that fit him like a glove, his cheeks dimpling with joy. I recalled how I'd teased him about his tie, how it was slightly askew. "Mom," he'd said, rolling his eyes, "stop fussing over me. I'm fine." But I kept fussing anyway because that's what mothers do. And that's why the thought of losing him to cancer in the prime of his life felt like a betrayal by the universe itself. Yet here we were not even a full day after his funeral, and Serafina was already plotting my exile. I closed my eyes, trying to replay Leon's last serious conversation with me. He'd been in bed too weak to rise. His once lustrous, wavy hair had turned thin and brittle, but he still managed a smile. Mom, he'd said, I want to make sure you're protected. He spoke about the will, about changes, about a lawyer named Mr. Sylvester, who would be handling things. That name echoed in my mind, though I remembered few details. It was so like Leon to handle things quietly, not wanting to burden me with the ugly side of business, but in saving me from anxiety, he'd left me in the dark. Now all I had were scraps of information. A gentle knock on the door made me jump. To my relief, it was Damien. He hesitated, then stepped in. Mom's been acting weird. She keeps muttering about how you don't belong here anymore. Is that true? My heart clenched. I wanted to spare him the ugly truth of adult schemes, but I also knew he was old enough to sense the tension. Don't worry, sweetheart, I said softly. We'll figure things out. He nodded, but his dark eyes remained troubled. He looked so much like Leon, it almost made me cry all over again. After he left, I made a promise to myself that I would not crumble. Leon had done something to secure my future, and I intended to find out exactly what Serafina might believe her victory was guaranteed, but she was about to learn that love, especially a mother's love, can be a formidable shield. Morning came faster than I would have liked, bringing with it a swirl of phone calls and legal appointments. My head pounded with exhaustion, but I forced myself to move. I changed into a simple black dress, pinned my short silver hair in place, and set off with Serafina, Damien, and Paige to Mr. Sylvester's office. The plan was to read Leon's will, some necessary formality, I'd been told, while Serafina clacked her heels briskly across the parking lot, her pixie cut shining under the sun. I trailed behind with my cane. Damien walked beside me, his protective stance heartbreaking and sweet all at once. Paige clung to my free hand, both curious and apprehensive. Mr. Sylvester's law firm occupied a neat suite in a mid-rise building downtown. We took an elevator up to the 8th floor, every ding echoing like a countdown to some unknown judgment. The waiting room smelled faintly of coffee and vanilla air freshener, an odd contrast to the tension twisting inside my stomach. When Mr. Sylvester ushered us into his office, he offered his condolences but kept his demeanor professional. I watched Serafina's face as she settled into a chair, crossing her legs with practiced poise. She looked bored, as though she expected everything to go her way. Then Mr. Sylvester began reading Leon's final instructions. It was a long document, clearly, carefully crafted. I felt tears prick my eyes as he spoke of Leon's deep love for his children. And yes, for me. I clutched a tissue, waiting for the shoe to drop, anticipating how Serafina might react. Then came the bombshell: Leon had transferred ownership of the house into a trust with me, Beatrice Caldwell named as trustee and principal occupant for the duration of my life. Serafina's eyes bulged and her jaw tightened. That must be a mistake, she sputtered, glancing at Mr. Sylvester. Leon and I agreed. The house was in our names only. There's no way he could do that without my consent. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, his expression cool. Actually, Mrs. Caldwell, you signed the transfer papers 3 years ago. Leon arranged it as part of his estate planning, and you co-signed at the final closing. The color drained from her face. I could practically see the gears turning in her mind as she realized the scale of what Leon had done. But that wasn't all. Mr. Sylvester went on detailing how the family business, an architectural firm founded by Leon, would be placed under the partial ownership of Damien and Paige. Once they reached adulthood, the remainder would be co-managed by a board Leon personally selected. As for financial assets, Leon had left me a monthly allowance, explicitly noting it was to ensure I never faced hardship. The bulk of Serafina's inheritance turned out to be a modest sum that paled in comparison to what she had assumed she'd receive. She'd believed she would reign supreme over Leon's fortune, but he had been strategic. He'd created a structure that protected both his children and me, while granting Serafina just enough so that she couldn't claim total disinheritance. The tension in the room was suffocating. I could feel Serafina's rage boiling beneath her poised exterior. Once Mr. Sylvester concluded, there was a heavy silence. Serafina stood so abruptly, her chair scraped the floor, causing Paige to jump in alarm. "I won't accept this," she snapped. He was delirious near the end. He didn't know what he was signing. "I'm contesting this will, all of it," she stormed out, leaving Mr. Sylvester calmly stacking papers as though he'd seen this scene play out 100 times before. Damien and Paige looked at me with eyes full of questions. I had no immediate answers. Outside the building, Serafina was on her phone, presumably contacting some high-powered attorney friend. I overheard snippets of her conversation terms, like undue influence and elder manipulation. She shot me a death glare that nearly froze me in place. Damien tried to speak to her, but she brushed him aside with a clipped, "Not now." Before we parted ways, she paused in front of me, her expression cold as winter. "You won't get away with this," she hissed, turning on her heel to leave with Paige in tow. My granddaughter cast a worried glance over her shoulder, confused and frightened. I let out a shaky breath resting on a nearby bench, while Damien stood guard. My cane felt heavier than ever, but beneath the weight of sorrow and conflict, I felt a small glimmer of relief. Leon, even in his final moments, had found a way to protect me. If you're enjoying this story so far, consider subscribing to our channel to stay updated on new chapters and stories. In the days that followed, I realized Serafina wasn't bluffing. Legal papers arrived at my doorstep, official documents challenging Leon's mental capacity and claiming I had coerced him into rewriting the will. A part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but mostly I was frightened. How could I, a woman in my late 60s, barely able to climb stairs without wincing, be accused of manipulating my terminally ill son? Worse, she was trying to paint me as a scheming mother-in-law who took advantage of Leon while he was weak. The irony left a bitter taste in my mouth. At first, I considered facing this alone, but the thought of stepping into a courtroom unprepared terrified me. So I called Harriet Evans, my oldest friend and a retired judge. She had a practical chin-length hairstyle of neatly curled white hair, giving her an air of authority. She listened intently as I sobbed through the details, offering me tissues and gentle nods. When I was done, she let out a low whistle. "You're in deep waters. Beatrice Serafina knows how to play dirty. We need someone who can meet her blow for blow." Harriet put me in touch with Michelle Song, an attorney specializing in elder law. Michelle had a professional bob of glossy black hair and a demeanor that balanced kindness with fierce intelligence. "I've seen cases like yours," she told me during our first consultation. "Don't underestimate how cruel family can become when money is on the line. Fortunately, we have the law and Leon's careful paperwork on our side." I handed her every document I possessed, even the ones I didn't fully understand, every signature, every note from Leon. She scanned them thoroughly, nodding and jotting down notes. "This is good, Beatrice. This is really good. We'll build a strong case." Despite her confidence, I still felt a twisting anxiety in my stomach. I dreaded the thought of stepping back into that tension, the possibility that some judge would believe Serafina's accusations over the truth. After all, I had no illusions about my daughter-in-law's ability to spin her own narrative. She was charismatic, persuasive, and unscrupulous, but I had something she didn't: Leon's unwavering intention preserved in legal ink. The first pre-trial hearing arrived, and the weight of everything threatened to pull me under. Michelle guided me through the courthouse, past the austere corridors that smelled of disinfectant and new carpets. We sat at a wooden table in a small courtroom, with high ceilings. Serafina arrived moments later, flanked by Eric Dewey, her attorney, an impeccably dressed man rumored to be a shark in legal circles. Damien and Paige were absent. Serafina had insisted the situation was too stressful for them, though I suspected she simply didn't want them hearing the truth. As the session began, Eric launched into a series of allegations. Leon was too ill to make rational decisions. I had whispered manipulative suggestions in his ear, and the new will was an obvious attempt to exploit an ailing man. My heart hammered and my breath came in shallow bursts. Michelle stood with unwavering calm. Your Honor, we have solid medical testimony from Leon's attending physicians, confirming his mental clarity during the will's revision. We also have multiple witnesses who can attest to the fact that Leon initiated these changes months before his health took a severe turn. He acted decisively, not under duress. The judge, an older woman named Margaret Merriweather, peered over her glasses with a stern gaze. She asked pointed questions, trying to discern if there was any merit to Serafina's claims. My eyes flicked toward Serafina. She maintained a stoic expression, though her posture was tense. When Michelle presented the documents containing Serafina's own signature on the trust transfer, I watched a flicker of alarm cross her features. Her attorney tried to pivot, focusing on emotional arguments, painting me as a clinging mother who refused to let go. When the gavel struck to adjourn, the judge said she would consider the evidence and reconvene in a few weeks for further proceedings. As we left, Serafina brushed past me, her voice low. "Don't get comfortable, old woman," she spat. "I'm not letting you keep what's mine." The venom in her words made my pulse spike, but I lifted my chin. I remembered Leon's quiet resolve, and it bolstered me. He'd given me a fighting chance, and I wasn't going to cower. Tension in the house became unbearable. Though Serafina spent most of her time in a separate wing, the occasional clashes in the kitchen or living room were like sword fights masked by polite words. Damien and Paige felt it too. Damien had begun skipping meals to avoid the awkward stares, and Paige grew silent, a far cry from the bright chatterbox she once was. At night, I'd hear Serafina pacing on the phone, her clipped tones bouncing off the walls. I knew she was coordinating with Eric Dewey, searching for any shred of evidence to discredit me. One evening, I found Paige curled up on the back porch, staring at the sky with tears glistening in her eyes. She wore her braids undone, her hair a cascade of waves, unusual for her, as she normally loved her twin plaits. "Grandma," she whispered, "why does Mom hate you now? Why is everything so different?" My heart ached and I gently took her hand. "Your mom is angry and scared. Sometimes people do hurtful things when they feel that way. It's not your fault." Paige nodded, resting her head against me, and for a moment we just watched the stars together, sharing a silent, fragile peace. In a separate moment, I tried speaking with Damien about the situation. His shoulders slumped as he confessed. "Mom keeps telling me you're trying to take the house from us, but Dad always said you were welcome here. I don't know who to believe." His wavering faith in me stung, though I understood Serafina had been his caretaker too. "Believe what your heart tells you," I said gently. "Your dad wanted this family to stay together in a healthy way, but sometimes grown-ups don't do the right thing." I attempted to talk with Serafina directly about how we might peacefully coexist while the legal process played out, but she brushed me off. "I have nothing to say to you until we settle this in court," she snapped, turning on her heel. Still, I wouldn't let bitterness overwhelm me. I kept reminding myself that I had Leon's protective measures and a fierce attorney in my corner, and deep inside I sensed there might be more to discover about Leon's preparations, something Serafina might not even suspect. My suspicions were confirmed 2 weeks later when I decided to sort through Leon's office and area. Serafina had largely neglected since his death. The office, a modest yet cozy space, smelled faintly of the aftershave Leon used, sandalwood and cedar. His wide desk was covered in neat stacks of architectural sketches, old receipts, and half-finished notes. Memories of him hunched over that desk, late into the night, tugged at my heart. Those were days he was building his business from the ground up, determined to provide a stable life for his family. At first, I found only typical paperwork, deeds, contracts, and financial statements, some of which I recognized from our first round of legal proceedings. Then, while rummaging through the lower drawers, I came across a small lockbox. Tucked beside it was a ring of keys on a labeled keychain. One was marked Lockbox, Personal. My curiosity piqued, I gingerly opened the box to discover a flash drive sealed in a plastic pouch with a handwritten label, For Mom. My heart pounded so fiercely it drowned out everything else. I sat down at Leon's desk, booted up his old laptop, and plugged in the flash drive. It contained a trove of files, PDFs, audio recordings, and even a few videos. My eyes widened as I realized this was evidence of Seraphina's duplicity. In one audio file, her voice came through clearly, discussing with some man, Ryan or Rylan, the possibility of moving away after Leon passed. She spoke about selling the house, using the funds for a fresh start, and taking care of the old bat. I pressed my hand to my mouth, sickened yet relieved at the same time. Leon had known. He must have been gathering this proof over months, determined to protect me and the children from Seraphina's machinations. Tears blurred my vision as I listened, heartbreak mingling with vindication. Leon's voice was in there too, calm but full of quiet resolve. In one clip, he said, I'm not letting my mother be pushed aside. This family is bigger than Seraphina's ambitions. If anything happens to me, I want the truth to be known. My fingers trembled when I ejected the flash drive. Leon had left me a gift from beyond the grave, one that could change the entire course of the legal battle. I wasted no time contacting Michelle Song. The moment I mentioned the evidence, I could practically hear her leaning forward in her chair over the phone. Bring it to me, she said, her tone thrumming with urgency. The next morning, I traveled to her office, a cozy space filled with floor-to-ceiling shelves of law books and a faint hint of jasmine tea. Michelle's bobbed hair was pinned back in a clip, revealing an expression of unwavering focus as I explained everything. She set up her laptop, and we listened to several of the recordings together. The conversation in which Seraphina brazenly discussed institutionalizing me so she could sell the property was the most damning. It was legal in our state to record such conversations without the other person's consent, provided one party, Leon, knew about it. The rest, emails, text, screenshots, and financial documents, painted a chilling picture of Seraphina's betrayal. With every file we opened, Michelle's eyes widened. This is exactly what we needed, she said. We can prove that Seraphina was deceiving Leon, siphoning funds, and planning to oust you. This can turn the tide in court. Despite the relief my emotions warred inside me, there was a horrible sadness in discovering how thoroughly my daughter-in-law had plotted against our family. Yet there was also relief in knowing Leon had prepared for this. Even in his darkest days, he had found the strength to protect me and his children from beyond the grave. A rush of gratitude flooded my heart, mingling with the deep ache of missing him. Michelle placed a reassuring hand on mine. We need to be strategic about presenting this, she said. If we drop it on them too early, they'll scramble to craft a counter strategy. Let's wait until the next hearing. Then we'll deliver everything as one decisive blow. She began drafting motions and highlighting key points of evidence. I nodded, trusting her expertise. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of genuine hope. Before I left, Michelle handed me a tissue, noticing my teary eyes. Leon did well, she murmured. I nodded, pressing the tissue to my face. Yes, he did, and I silently vowed to see his plan through to the end, to protect our home, our memories, and our family legacy. Back at the house, I slipped the flash drive into a secure place, a locked drawer in my room that only I could access. Serafina was out at the time, and I wondered if she was with the mysterious man from the recordings. I tried not to dwell on it. Instead, I sought out Damien and Paige, determined to spend some quality time with them. They were in the living room, the television muted while Paige fiddled with her braids, a sign of her nervousness. "Why don't we make dinner together?" I suggested. We hadn't done anything fun as a family in ages. Damien gave a hesitant nod, and Paige tried a half smile. We made our way to the kitchen, pulling out ingredients to cook a simple pasta. The tension in the house lingered, but as we chopped tomatoes and stirred sauce, I noticed Paige relaxing, asking me about cooking tips. Damien recounted a funny story from school involving a friend who dyed his hair green. They laughed at the absurdity of it all, and for a fleeting moment, it almost felt normal again. After dinner, Damien helped me wash the dishes. "Grandma, I know you and Mom are fighting," he said quietly, "but I just want you to know, Dad would have wanted us to stick together." My heart squeezed painfully. "I know, sweetheart," I replied. "I'm doing everything I can to keep this family intact." We shared a solemn look, both wishing Leon were there to guide us. Later that night, as I settled into bed, I heard Serafina's heels click against the marble floors. She was back, presumably from some clandestine meeting. My phone buzzed and a text message from Michelle popped up. "We're set for a critical hearing next week. Be ready." I turned off the light with a surge of resolve. Serafina's footsteps paused outside my door, as though she were listening to see if I was asleep. After a tense moment, they continued down the hall. I shut my eyes, hugging a pillow close. Leon's memory flickered in my mind. I whispered a quiet thank you to him. Without his foresight, I'd be defenseless. But now, thanks to his meticulous planning, we had a weapon that could shatter Serafina's deception. Enjoying the story? Don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss an update or a new tale. The day of the critical hearing dawned gray and rainy. I arrived with Michelle, each of us holding umbrellas that dripped onto the courthouse steps. My cane tapped against the wet concrete, and the chill in my bones matched the dread lingering in my heart. But beneath that dread was a potent sense of purpose. Today, we'd present the evidence Leon left behind. Today, Serafina's falsehoods would be laid bare. Inside the courtroom, Judge Merriweather presided, her expression neutral but curious. Eric Dewey was already there sorting through papers. Serafina sat rigid, her platinum blonde pixie perfectly styled, betraying no sign of anxiety except the occasional twitch in her jaw. Michelle quietly arranged her notes, and then the session began. Eric launched immediately into his argument that Leon was not of sound mind. He introduced an expert witness who claimed that Leon's medication would have impaired his judgment significantly. My stomach tightened. Michelle had prepared for this, but it was painful to hear them paint my son as a confused invalid. When Michelle rose to speak, her calm voice filled the room. "Your Honor, before we delve further into testimony, we have newly discovered evidence that directly contradicts Mrs. Caldwell's claims. She signaled me and I handed her the flash drive. She explained Leon's legal right to record conversations in his home and the existence of corresponding emails verifying Serafina's intentions." The judge's eyebrows lifted with interest as Michelle requested permission to play a few short clips. Eric objected, calling it ambush evidence, but the judge allowed it. The audio played crystal clear. Serafina's voice discussing how she'd put me in a care facility and sell the house. Another clip revealed her collusion with a man named Ryan about moving out of state once Leon passed. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Serafina's face blanched, her composure slipping like a mask in a thunderstorm. Michelle then presented emails from Serafina to Ryan, complete with timestamps showing they were sent while Leon was hospitalized. Silence followed thick as fog. The judge scrutinized Serafina. Eric cleared his throat, struggling to form a coherent response. But the damage was done. Leon's final gift had shattered the core of Seraphina's legal argument. Judge Merriweather's expression hardened as she glanced from Seraphina to Eric Dewey. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said, voice echoing in the hushed chamber, "this evidence strongly suggests you not only planned to remove Beatrice from her home, but also misrepresented your husband's mental capacity to gain control of his estate. Can you explain these recordings?" Seraphina's mouth opened and closed wordlessly, like a fish gasping for air. Finally, she stammered, "This is taken out of context. Leon wasn't even present for those conversations. They don't prove anything." Eric tried to intervene, but the judge raised a hand to silence him. Then Michelle stood systematically dismantling Seraphina's excuses. She pointed out the matching dates on hospital records showing Leon was alive and lucid at the time of each recording and the sequence of emails where Seraphina openly discussed her big plans. By the time she finished, Seraphina's face had turned a blotchy red. Judge Merriweather called a short recess to review the evidence in private, instructing both sides to remain in the courtroom. As soon as the judge left, Seraphina whirled on me. "How dare you?" she hissed, eyes brimming with fury. She looked like a cornered animal, all the arrogant bravado drained away. "Leon tricked me into signing those papers. You knew about this. You played along with him." I clutched the handle of my cane, keeping my voice as level as I could. "Leon tried to secure our family's future. He knew you were planning to leave with his money and throw me aside." Tears pricked my eyes. Not just from anger, but from grief. If only Leon were here to see this. "It's your own words on those recordings, Seraphina. You did this to yourself." Her eyes darted around the courtroom, perhaps searching for sympathy or an escape. There was none. Eric tried to calm her, but she shoved his hand away. "You'll regret this," she muttered, her voice hollow. I said nothing in return. The truth was already laid bare, and regret was not something that existed on my side of this conflict. My regrets were for Leon for the heartbreak he'd suffered, not for exposing the woman who betrayed him. When the judge returned, her decision was swift. The recordings and emails were admissible evidence. The validity of Leon's will stood on firm ground, and Seraphina's contestation was left wobbling on toothpick legs. Formal proceedings would continue for a final ruling, but it was clear the court no longer viewed Seraphina's claims favorably. Her shoulders sagged under the blow, and her attorney looked as though he were already contemplating his next career move. After the hearing, I stepped outside with Michelle. The rain had cleared, leaving behind a cold, crisp air that felt strangely invigorating. I leaned against a nearby pillar cane, in hand trying to steady the whirl of emotions inside me. Gratitude, sorrow, and vindication collided in a chaotic dance. Michelle gave me a gentle pat on the shoulder. "We're in a strong position," she said, her voice threaded with optimism. "Given the evidence, the judge will likely uphold the will in its entirety." I exhaled slowly, letting the tension release with each breath. "Thank you, Michelle," I managed. "You fought for me and for Leon's memory in a way I couldn't do on my own." She smiled, adjusting a stray lock of hair from her professional bob. "You had everything you needed," she replied softly. "Leon provided the ammunition. I just loaded the cannon." A commotion drew our attention to the courthouse doors. Seraphina had followed us outside, fury radiating from her. "You'll regret crossing me," she snapped, pointing a manicured finger, her voice trembling with desperation. "This isn't over. I'll find a way to get what's mine." I felt a swell of pity for her. Even after everything, she was so consumed by greed and bitterness that she couldn't see the damage she'd inflicted upon herself and her children. Michelle squared her shoulders, stepping between us. "Mrs. Caldwell, any further threats will be documented. I suggest you let the legal process run its course." With a final glare, Seraphina turned on her heel, her pixie cut glinting in the winter sunlight. As she marched away, I sensed a new chapter beginning, one in which her power over me and over Leon's legacy was rapidly diminishing. I didn't delude myself into thinking she'd give up easily, but I finally believed I could stand firm against her cane or no cane. The final hearing took place a month later, and the tension preceding it was excruciating. Serafina's battle plan seemed to revolve around stalling tactics, filing paperwork to delay proceedings, making emotional pleas about how she was the rightful heir, and even claiming that my presence in the house created a hostile environment for the children. None of it gained traction. Meanwhile, life in the household teetered between awkward cohabitation and open warfare. Serafina stopped talking to me altogether, except for curt orders about chores or finances. She began spending more nights away from home, returning at odd hours. Damien confided that he heard rumors she was in Phoenix, meeting with potential buyers for the house. I thought the court forbade any sale. He said anxiously. I assured him, they did, sweetheart. She can't legally sell anything, but that doesn't mean she won't try. Paige's mood lifted slightly after I assured her I wasn't leaving anytime soon. We resumed our small traditions, baking cookies on Fridays, reading stories before bed, even though she was a bit old for bedtime tales. She liked hearing about my own childhood, about how my mother and father once ran a small bakery. Telling her those stories was therapeutic, reminding me of the warmth and resilience passed down through generations. One day, I spotted a for sale sign stashed behind a stack of gardening tools in the garage. I stared at it, my stomach lurching. It was brand new, presumably purchased by Serafina. Maybe she thought she'd preempt the court's ruling by marketing the house in secret. My hands shook as I left it where it was. There was no point confronting her. She'd only deny it. Besides, the law and Leon's will was on my side. As the hearing date approached, Michelle finalized our arguments. We had the recordings, the financial records, and testimonies from Leon's former employees, who'd witnessed how he handled his estate planning while still lucid, every piece fit together to form a near insurmountable case. Despite my anxiety, I could almost taste victory. Leon's final stand, carefully orchestrated in the midst of his suffering, was about to secure not just a legal triumph, but a moral one. That morning in court had a charged silence to it, like the hush before a hurricane. Judge Merriweather listened intently as Michelle presented our evidence one final time, walking through each recorded conversation, each email, each financial statement. Serafina's attorney attempted a last-ditch effort at painting me as an unfit elder who coerced Leon, but this time the judge seemed unimpressed. When it was Serafina's turn to speak, she delivered a tearful monologue claiming Leon's last days were a haze of morphine and confusion. She insisted he never would have cut her out if he'd been in his right mind. Yet her performance crumbled when Michelle replayed the audio of Serafina's own words. The judge narrowed her eyes, leaning forward as if to scrutinize every syllable. In that moment, I could feel the tide turning irrevocably in my favor. Finally, Judge Merriweather took a deep breath and announced her ruling. She upheld Leon's will in its entirety, declaring it valid and enforceable. The documentation, combined with the recordings and the timeline of Leon's decisions, left no doubt that he knew exactly what he was doing. Serafina's challenge was dismissed, and she was ordered to adhere to the trust stipulations. My eyes brimmed with tears. Michelle gave my hand a victorious squeeze. The tension I'd carried for months seemed to drain from my body, replaced by a flood of relief and gratitude. Across the aisle, Serafina stood with trembling shoulders. Her face was chalk white, eyes rimmed with fury and shock. She let out a sharp cry. This isn't justice. He was my husband, but the judge, her expression unyielding, simply said, "Perhaps your husband anticipated how you'd act, Mrs. Caldwell. This court is upholding his final wishes." Serafina's attorney tried to calm her, but she pulled away. In that moment, I almost felt sorry for her, almost, After everything she'd done, after the endless nights of uncertainty and fear, I couldn't muster the empathy I once had. Leon's children were safe, and I was safe. That was all that mattered now. Court adjourned. The gavel's echo signaled the end of one of the most harrowing chapters of my life. Leon had done it. He'd protected me even in death. In the weeks that followed, Serafina's anger reached a fever pitch. She rampaged through the house, slamming doors and muttering curses under her breath. She didn't speak to me or the children if she could avoid it, and she began packing her belongings in secret. I'd occasionally see boxes stacked in the garage, labeled for destinations I couldn't read. Damien told me she discussed moving to Phoenix permanently. Though Paige was torn, Mom said I could come with her. Paige confided, tears trembling on her lashes. But I don't want to leave you or the house Dad loved. I assured both children that they were always welcome to stay with me in the home Leon intended for them. Meanwhile, Serafina sought out every possible way to negotiate the will's terms, attempting to buy out my portion of the trust or coax me into selling. I refused. In truth, the idea of living alongside her indefinitely was unbearable, but the law protected me, not her. The final blow came one afternoon when she cornered me in the living room, her voice quivering with desperation. "What do you want from me, Beatrice?" she demanded. "Name your price to leave this house. I'll pay it." I stared at her for a long moment. This woman who once shared family dinners, once called me Mom, now reduced to bribing me to vanish. "I want to honor Leon's wishes," I replied. "He wanted this home to be a sanctuary for the children and me. No amount of money can change that." Her face contorted into a mask of rage. Without another word, she turned and stormed off. It didn't take long for her to officially move out. She signed a few papers, relinquishing her claim to daily occupancy in exchange for a portion of the retirement funds, the same arrangement stipulated by Leon. With that money in hand, she left. Her last words to me were a hissed, "This isn't over," but her threat felt hollow. The courts had spoken and so had Leon. As far as I was concerned, the war was done. Like what you're reading? Subscribe now and be the first to catch new stories as they're released. The day Serafina departed, the house felt lighter, as though a dark cloud had finally lifted. Damien helped me collect the scattered boxes she left behind, mostly containing old receipts and reams of flashy decor magazines she once used for her real estate ventures. Paige retreated to her room, uncertain about what to make of her mother's abrupt exit. When I knocked softly on her door, she allowed me in. Her eyes were puffy hair, unbraided and messy, a stark contrast to the neat, playful braids she used to love. She didn't even hug me goodbye. Paige mumbled, tears clinging to her eyelashes. My heart cracked. For all Serafina's flaws, she was still Paige's mother. I wrapped my arms around my granddaughter, stroking her hair gently. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "You deserve better than that." Paige pressed her face against my shoulder. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice muffled by my blouse. I reminded her that according to the court's ruling, she and Damien were free to choose who they lived with. Serafina hadn't demanded primary custody, clearly more interested in her new life. After a reflective silence, Paige said she wanted to stay. "Dad would have wanted us here," she whispered. I nodded, tearfully grateful. The idea of losing my grandchildren, too, would have been too painful to bear. Damien was on the porch when I found him. He gazed at the meticulously landscaped lawn, a testament to Leon's pride in homeownership. "It's weird," he said. "I miss Dad more than ever, but I feel relieved that Mom's gone." I put a hand on his shoulder, offering what comfort I could. "You can hold both emotions at once: love for your father, confusion about your mother, and relief for yourself. There's no rule saying you can only feel one thing." He nodded, and we stood there for a moment, letting the evening breeze carry away some of the tension. Over the coming days, the house transformed into a space of quiet healing. I moved my belongings from the guest room to the master bedroom. fulfilling Leon's wish that I truly claim the house as my own. It wasn't easy facing the ghost of my son in every corner, but each day the pain eased a fraction. Free from Seraphina's oppressive presence, I began to rediscover small joys. One morning, I woke up earlier than usual and made a pot of chamomile tea, sipping it slowly while watching the sunlight filter through the curtains. The sound of birds greeted me, rather than the anxious shuffle of Seraphina's high heels or the slam of a car door. For the first time in what felt like ages, the house was at peace. Damien spent his free time studying or helping me with chores, stepping into the shoes of a caretaker whenever my arthritis flared. His hair, once perpetually brushed aside, had grown into a deliberate style that suited his thoughtful demeanor, slightly tousled but neatly trimmed around the edges. Paige resumed her passion for crafts and reading her braids. Swinging cheerfully once more, she told me about her school projects, her favorite books, and a budding interest in drama club. I encouraged her to pursue it to find expression for all the tangled emotions swirling within her. In the evenings, we sat down to dinner as a family, just the three of us. Gone were the tense silences. In their place, we had conversation peppered with laughter and occasional memories of Leon. Sometimes we cried, but it felt healthy, like we were letting go of the sorrow that once weighed us down. On Fridays, I continued the tradition of baking cookies, a custom that began years before Leon's passing. One night after the kids had gone to bed, I sank into the living room couch, flipping through an old photo album. Images of Leon's childhood made me smile, him with his first bicycle, him at his high school graduation, him grinning beside Seraphina at their wedding. My eyes lingered on that photo. The joy on both their faces was genuine. Then, it was hard to reconcile that moment with the bitter woman she'd become. Before turning in, I said a little prayer thanking the heavens and Leon for the chance to remain in the house we all cherished. Each day reminded me that while the journey was excruciating, I had not merely survived, but found a semblance of hope in the aftermath. As weeks turned to months, I found myself busier than ever. Leon's architectural firm needed a representative from the family, someone to oversee major decisions on behalf of Damien and Paige, who were still minors. The company's board, aware of the events that had transpired, welcomed me with warmth and respect. These were people Leon trusted, and they in turn trusted me to uphold his vision. So I immersed myself in learning about architectural designs, budgets, and business strategies. At first, it was daunting. I'd been a homemaker for much of my life, and my experiences with Gregory's small ventures were a far cry from running a firm that handled multi-million-dollar projects. But I took online courses, read books, and listened intently during board meetings. Slowly but surely, I gained the confidence needed to represent my grandchildren's interests. Damien sometimes joined me on site visits after school, curious about his father's world. He'd roam around wide-eyed, observing the sketches pinned to the walls, sometimes tossing out surprisingly thoughtful suggestions. Dad would have wanted more open spaces. He'd remark, eyes alight with that same creative spark Leon had. It warmed my heart to see him connect with his father's legacy in a meaningful way. Meanwhile, Paige discovered a talent for sketching interiors. She filled her sketchbook with imaginative designs, bedrooms with fairy lights, living rooms with plush reading nooks, and would shyly show me her drawings. I encouraged her fervently, seeing how it helped her process grief. Each pencil stroke was a tribute to her father, a reflection of how creativity ran in the family. Amid these improvements, Seraphina's presence lingered like a distant thundercloud. She called occasionally stilted conversations that Paige and Damien endured rather than enjoyed. Sometimes she demanded updates about the house or the trust, but I directed her to the attorneys. My days of catering to her manipulations were over. The children seemed to sense that boundary as well. They maintained civility, but not intimacy. Serafina had burned that bridge with her own hands. Even though the heartbreak of losing Leon would never fully vanish, life was forging ahead. As I balanced board meetings, homework checks, and household tasks, I often paused to marvel at how close I'd come to losing everything and how Leon's love had saved us all. One autumn afternoon, Harriet Evans, my dear friend and retired judge, invited me for tea. I welcomed the break from my newly busy schedule. Harriet's cozy home was a testament to her refined tastes, soft classical music playing in the background, shelves lined with legal text and detective novels. She poured Earl Grey into dainty cups and offered me a seat by a sunlit window. We chatted about everything from the children's adjustments to the complexities of dealing with the firm's board. Harriet listened with genuine interest, occasionally interjecting with a sage piece of advice. When I mentioned Serafina's occasional phone calls, Harriet pursed her lips. She may try to worm her way back in, she cautioned. Be vigilant, Beatrice. People like her rarely accept defeat willingly. I nodded, acknowledging the truth in Harriet's words. Though Serafina seemed preoccupied with her life in Phoenix, if rumors about her setting up a new real estate office were true, I couldn't discount the possibility she might resurface bearing grievances or demands. Still, for now, the distance was a blessing. The children were thriving, and peace had finally settled over our home. During the conversation, Harriet also asked me if I'd ever consider moving on romantically. I chuckled, smoothing my short silver bob in amusement. At my age, Harriet, I teased, I'm more concerned with keeping my cane from wobbling on uneven pavement than courting gentlemen. Harriet only gave me a knowing smile. You have plenty of life ahead of you, my friend. Her words lingered in my mind. Sometimes late at night, I'd reflect on how drastically my life had changed since Leon's death. I was no longer simply the grieving mother-in-law living under another's roof. I had a household to manage, a family business to oversee, and grandchildren to guide through their teenage years. The notion of sharing that journey with someone else felt both foreign and intriguing. My devotion to Gregory had been strong, but he'd been gone nearly a decade now. As I left Harriet's home, I realized she'd given me something valuable, the reminder that our stories don't end simply because we endure heartbreak. Sometimes new chapters are waiting to be written. Winter arrived, dusting the neighborhood with snow and ushering in the holiday season. The house seemed to embrace the change. Twinkling lights framed our windows, and the aroma of pine from a freshly cut Christmas tree permeated every room. It had been years since we had a real tree. Serafina had always insisted on an artificial one for practicality, but with her gone, the kids and I decided to indulge in the real thing. Paige decorated it with homemade ornaments, each carefully crafted and painted, while Damien meticulously arranged the lights. One evening just before Christmas, we settled in the living room with hot cocoa, enjoying the tree's glow. Damien had discovered a box of old home videos featuring Leon. With cautious excitement, he played them. The screen lit up with memories, Leon blowing out birthday candles at age 7, Leon receiving his high school diploma, Leon dancing awkwardly at his wedding reception. The three of us laughed and sniffled in equal measure, seeing his face, hearing his voice. It felt like he was there again, guiding us toward better days. When the footage showed a brief clip of Serafina beaming, holding a bouquet, Paige tensed. She used to be happy, she murmured, before everything went bad. I smoothed back Paige's braids. People change, sweetheart. Sometimes for the worse. But it's not your fault, or your dad's. She nodded, though her eyes were misty. Later that night, as the kids slept, I quietly thanked Leon for leaving behind not just legal protections, but these memories. They felt like a bridge between past and present, reminding us of the joys we once shared. As I switched off the living room lamp, the tree's gentle glow remained like a promise that hope could still outshine our sorrow. A few days before the holiday, a package arrived from Phoenix. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Inside were two gifts labeled for Paige and Damien, Both kids looked at me uncertainly. Should we open them? Paige asked. They're from Mom. I told her it was up to them. They did, finding generic toys and a short, impersonal note. Merry Christmas, I'll call soon. Paige shrugged and tucked the note away. Damien barely looked at his gift before setting it aside. It was clear their bonds with Serafina were fraying beyond repair. Time moved forward, as it always does. By the following spring, I'd transitioned into a comfortable rhythm at the firm. Damien, now 16, showed a genuine passion for architectural concepts. Page 13 blossomed in her drama club. She even landed a leading role in the school play. The house, once a battleground, had become a nurturing haven for us all, where each new day held a glimmer of promise. Sometimes in quiet moments, I remembered Serafina's parting words, "This isn't over." Yet months had passed without any sign of her reappearing. Occasionally, she'd make a brief, awkward call to the children, her voice carefully measured, avoiding the subject of her abrupt departure. She never asked to visit or invite them to Phoenix. I suspected she was entangled in her own new life, perhaps not entirely happily. Rumors even suggested she and her partner had split. On a breezy Saturday afternoon, the three of us packed a cooler and headed to a nearby lake for a small picnic, something we hadn't done since Leon was alive. I watched as Damien skipped rocks along the water while Paige chased after butterflies, giggling. As she tried to snap photos with her phone, I had to lean on my cane now and then, but I still managed a slow walk along the shoreline, the smell of fresh water invigorating my senses. It struck me how free we felt, free from Serafina's venomous presence, free from the looming threat of losing our home, and even free from some of the grief's darkest shadows. I found a shady spot under a tree, eased myself onto a blanket, and exhaled. The children joined me, breathless from laughter. We shared sandwiches, told stories about Leon, like how he once tried to teach Damien to fish, but ended up tangling the line in a tree. The memory made us laugh so hard we cried. But it was a good cry, the kind that cleanses the pain and replaces it with gratitude. Leon had left us a gift that reached beyond finances or property. He'd left us the chance to keep loving each other without fear. And in that moment, I knew that was the best revenge against anyone who ever wished harm upon our family. If this story has captured your heart, remember to subscribe and share it with friends who love a gripping tale of family betrayal and redemption. 2 years have passed since that fateful funeral day. In that time, I've watched my grandchildren flourish. Damien immerses himself in advanced classes, often creating mock architectural models in our garage, while Paige hones her dramatic flair in school productions. The business Leon built continues to thrive, and I serve as its guiding presence on behalf of my grandchildren. Though I never imagined I'd be handling board decisions at my age, I've found a new sense of purpose. My short silver bob has grown out slightly, which Paige playfully styles whenever she thinks I need a fashion update. The house itself stands as a testament to both tragedy and triumph, a place where sorrow once threatened to crush us, but instead gave rise to resilience and grace. I still visit Leon's grave regularly. I bring fresh flowers, white lilies in the spring, vibrant sunflowers in the summer, and share updates as though he can still hear me. I tell him about Damien's latest engineering project, or how Paige left the audience in awe with her performance of a Shakespeare monologue. Sometimes I linger, closing my eyes, almost sensing his wry grin and hearing his gentle laugh, proud of how we've persevered. Serafina remains a distant figure. She surfaces with the occasional phone call to the kids, but they've grown adept at politely deflecting her prying questions. Rumor has it she's moved several times, chasing opportunities that never quite pan out. The last I heard, she tried to sue a former business partner over a failed deal. Apparently, she's learned little from her ordeal, but I harbor no more bitterness. Leon's final act made sure her cruelty didn't succeed. She misjudged us both. Never expecting that a mother's love and her son's strategic foresight could shield our family so completely, I've also taken small steps to open my heart again, allowing the possibility of companionship in my twilight years. A gentleman named Henry Osborne from the local community center invited me to a gardening club. We chat about roses, tomatoes, and the unpredictability of the weather. It's pleasant, easy. He has a neat salt and pepper hairstyle that suits his gentle demeanor. Whether it leads to anything more doesn't concern me. I'm content to savor the present. And so, as I sit here by the window in the home, Leon safeguarded, I smile. My revenge against Serafina was never the point living well, was surrounded by love, laughter, and the legacy of my son. I can say with certainty, she celebrated too soon. My resolve and Leon's devotion left her speechless, and for that I am eternally grateful. Thank you for joining me by the fireside today on Her Fireside Stories. What a journey it's been from heartbreaking betrayal to a triumphant ending that saw justice brilliantly served. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the mother-in-law's clever victory. Do you think Serafina got exactly what she deserved? Did the mother-in-law handle things perfectly, or would you have done anything differently? Leave your comments below, and don't forget to mention where you're tuning in from. I always love discovering how far these stories reach. If you enjoyed this tale and want to support more heartwarming and thrilling stories, please hit that subscribe button and share Her Fireside Stories with your friends and family. Until next time, may your days be filled with love, your evenings peaceful, and your stories unforgettable. See you again soon at our next gathering by the fire.